This morning, states of emergency have been declared in 5 U.S. states. Joining me now from Satellite Beach in Florida is Jaclyn Whitall. She's a meteorologist with the Weather Network. Jaclyn, the hurricane has now been downgraded to a Category 3. What does that really mean?
Well, there's two crucial things that are going on this morning. One being that downgrade in terms of central pressure and wind speed, like you mentioned. The other big part of this is it's starting to take that turn to the northwest, which is great news if there's any great news to be had for the Bahamas. It's finally going to be moving that eye wall, which is the most destructive part of the hurricane that's been stalled over Grand Bahama Island. It'll finally be moving off the island. That doesn't mean they're still not going to be getting heavy rain and still getting, Cat 2, Cat 1, and tropical storm strength winds as it continued to move offshore. But at least the worst of it is now finally moving after that just absolutely devastating, horrendous forecast that I might add, stall that actually ended up verifying.
What caused this storm to stall? At one point, it was moving 1 mile per hour.
Yeah, and some of the updates we were reading, too, from the NHC was literally stationary. Like, I've never seen just the word stationary. So this is kind of an unprecedented storm in that, one thing, we don't tend to get Cat 5s that close to the southeast coast just sort of stalling out. The models did a fantastic job at picking this up. Fortunately, a very horrible outcome for the Bahamas. So what that is a lack of steering flow. So we look at winds in our atmosphere from different parts of the Caribbean, of the the Western Atlantic, in the Gulf of Mexico, and even dips in our jet stream through the Midwest United States, the east side of the United States. All those winds that are happening in the upper levels of the atmosphere are what is responsible for taking this and steering it out of the way. Unfortunately, we had pretty much a stall out, and those winds were so weak. So it just stalled. Finally, we're starting to see what we call a trough, and that's just a ribbon of air that's going to finally take it and kick it up the eastern seaboard of Florida. Great news that it's finally going to be moving, but we've got a lot of impacts that's still yet to be had here in Florida. So, speaking to locals here, they're prepared, and they're certainly going to get a lot less in the way of impact, but there still is going to be impact. 4 to 7 foot storm surge is possible here. Heavy rains are a possibility here, and even Cat 1 wind gusts are possible too.
Okay, so you mentioned that this storm, if you're in Florida, it's not as bad as we thought it was going to be. A lot of people are going to be breathing a sigh of relief. But is it possible, Jaclyn, that it could still shimmy over more westward and then cause the kind of problems that we were anticipating a couple of days ago?
Excellent question. I highly doubt that. Our models now are getting really close to finding the solution that will be real. So when we're looking 48 hours in advance and 72 hours out in advance, and this was, we're going back to Saturday morning, we're going back to Friday, we really didn't know how this would play out. But now the model, all the models have had data from the storm, from those hurricane recon missions ingested into those models, which means we can find almost a perfect solution. So all the models are coming together now in agreement. It does show that that center of circulation is going to stay offshore Florida by a long shot, 50, maybe more miles offshore. But even with that, this is the best analog. We look back in history to find storms that are very similar to this. The best analog that we could find is a storm I actually was here to chase in 2016 called Hurricane Matthew. And that storm took a very similar path. You can almost lay those National Hurricane Center cones of uncertainty over each other. They're almost a mimic. So what that meant was major flooding for Daytona Beach with storm surge. We had heavy rain. We did have Category 1 hurricane gusts. So there were still impacts. We're still going to see power outages potentially. And but yes, the worst of it will be staying offshore. As far as imminent landfall for the rest of the southeast U.S., we still have to watch Georgia, South Carolina, and even the Canadian Maritimes.
All right, Jaclyn Whitall, she's a meteorologist with the Weather Network.